Ask and it shall be given. This post was made on request because after my most overrated characters video, you guys let me know overwhelmingly that the most underrated is what you want to see next. But unlike my most overrated characters video, I'm gonna put a twist on it because I never try to make the same video twice. That one was Devil's Advocate, which is me making arguments I don't believe in for the sake of the video, but since everyone is gonna treat it like my arguments anyway, even though I say otherwise numerous times, I'ma just use my own arguments. Next one is going to be that this isn't strictly power scaling. Since these are my own arguments, I'm going to be doing characters that are not just underrated in strength, but are either underrated writing wise, importance wise, or just not talked about as much as I think they should be. First off on the list is gonna be Akainu. He was in my most overrated characters video because of the criteria I used to make it, which you'd have to see to know. A few of the characters are going to be in both videos because they're made differently, so don't say, but you had him as overrated before. It just means that you missed the criteria. But back to Akainu. Akainu is underrated in not just strength, but also in character because people genuinely have no idea what Akainu's motives actually even are. It's due to an immature view of the Marines and thinking that if you smile and laugh a lot, you're good, and if you don't, you're automatically evil. Akainu's morality is something I plan on going over in my Admirals video, which genuinely, I'm just gonna make the 3K sub special because it's almost 80 minutes long. Akainu is often dunked on because of the anime showings, which everyone should understand aren't canon, and yet whenever you bring up the fact that they aren't, people just ignore that and keep using them. I get you're upset that Ace died, but even Garp knew that Ace becoming a pirate meant that he now stood on the wrong side of justice. Pirates aren't the good guys. A Marine executing a pirate he has no ties to is literally just the way the world is in One Piece, and it's fair because pirates are literally the most evil people on average in the One Piece world outside of the Celestial Dragons. His strength is also vastly underrated because people will never acknowledge the fact that characters upscale to where the story is. You guys love using this argument for Dragon and Shanks, but will never use it for Akainu. Akainu is the main antagonist on the Marine side. Absolute justice is literally introduced in the story before Dragon is even a character. Akainu disrespect is just a foolish thing to be a proponent of. The story itself is going to prove you wrong via just going on. Speaking of characters who people disrespect for no logical reason, I have Mihawk up next. This is almost entirely power-based. The amount of people who like to use the fake titles argument as a reason why Mihawk isn't the strongest are still just ignoring the fact that regardless of Mihawk's title, the fact that he is Zoro's One Piece, his final endgame goal alone, is proof that he's the strongest swordsman. Zoro has spent his whole life training with the idea of beating Mihawk in mind. The entire series, Zoro has been fighting people, getting stronger and learning new techniques, specifically so he can fulfill his promise to Mihawk to never lose to another swordsman again. Mihawk could not have the title of the world's strongest swordsman, and narratively he would still be the strongest swordsman. Zoro is not going to fight Shanks, he's more than likely not going to fight Shamrock, he's already clashed with Nesjuro, and outside of taking note of the fact that he has a Kitetsu blade, there's literally zero important tie between them. He's not fighting Garling, and Shiryu is not going to be in the conversation for one of the strongest swordsmen of all time. Mihawk is what creates endgame Zoro. However strong you think Zoro is going to be EOS, Mihawk is the only way he gets there. And just like with Dragon and Shanks, the longer Mihawk goes into the story without ever showing us anything, is just further proof he upscales to wherever the story is by the time he fights. We've seen more from Shanks than we have from Mihawk, so by Shanks fans' own logic, that means he's going to be weaker than Mihawk, and that was your argument because y'all are the ones that are always using a story upscale nonsense for why Shanks is going to be top 1. Luffy's up here because of the fact that people think we still have a lot of story left before the end. We are damn near at the end of the story. There is no second Sabaody, there is no second 3D2Y, and there is no Straw Hat training arc. Oda is constantly showing you guys that the Straw Hats are now on that level. Whether or not it makes sense based off what he's written and shown us is irrelevant because he's telling us that this is where they are now. Luffy isn't going to be getting bodied by anyone in the future unless it's Blackbeard or Imu, and Luffy and Loki genuinely might do Imu like Yuji and Nanami did Mahito. The underration of Luffy comes from an underration of Kizaru in all honesty because people can't wrap their head around the fact that Luffy, who has now surpassed 2 emperors, could still struggle in a fight with an admiral. Luffy going band for band with Kizaru shows that almost no one in the verse can actually beat him anymore because he's stronger now in Elbaf than he was in Egghead when he was going relative with Kizaru. Roger isn't mid-diffing Luffy anymore, I'm keeping it 100. Neither is Shanks, Mihawk, Primebeard, Garp, Xebec. No one outside of maybe Davy Jones, Joy Boy, Nika, and the previous Nidhogg are beating Luffy with the mid to low diff difficulty, and that's me assuming that these people genuinely just gap the verse that hard. Getting Blackbeard out of the way early in the video, you all know why he's up here. It will never stop amazing me how many of you guys are willing to lie for the sake of downplaying Blackbeard's strength, but you've heard those arguments from me 100 times already, so I'm going to talk about his character instead. You guys underrate the fact of Blackbeard's intelligence as much as you underrate his strength. Knowing what battles to fight and what battles not to fight is not a knock against someone's character. Someone isn't a coward when they know that the juice isn't worth the squeeze to get it. Did anyone call Roger or Garp cowards for choosing to 2v1 Domi Xebec? Did anyone call Luffy a coward for letting everyone else jump in while he fought Kaido? Not only that argument, but the notion that Blackbeard is some unique evil that rocks with a hate specifically is just misreading both characters entirely. Blackbeard himself has never done anything more evil than any other pirate has done. The most evil thing you can say Blackbeard has done is letting the other Blackbeard pirates keep slaves on Hachinosu, which, newsflash, the king of the world would still have slaves. Rocks himself, by virtue of being the king of the world, would also have had slaves. I don't know where this projection of Luffy's ideals onto Xebec came from, but that man has never done anything to show that he was a different person than Blackbeard is right now outside of coming to rescue his family. Him chopping it up with Whitebeard does not prove he's a good person because Aokiji was chopping it up with Blackbeard and genuinely rocks with him as a partier even though they don't agree on everything morality wise. Blackbeard also cares about his family too. He literally named his flagship after the father he met when he was only 2 years old. Boiling characters down to the most bare bones disingenuous nonsense you can think of needs to stop because y'all are genuinely just moving with wrong ideas about the story itself, and that's just what's objectively true. Jokes and slander is funny and all, but if you genuinely can't see the different sides of what a character is supposed to be, you're just setting yourself up for anger when Oda shows you different sides of them that never contradicted what he wrote in the first place. Adding Enel in because he genuinely doesn't get talked about enough for what he is, was, and still can be. People who talk about Enel are like the judges of the One Piece community nowadays. They're almost like kid fans, except the character they're standing was actually him. People genuinely forget how different Enel felt as a villain back then during the pre-time skip. Crocodile was a Luffy only opponent. He never fought anyone else on Alabasta like that besides Luffy. Same with anyone before that, as a matter of fact. Enel is the first character you get where we see I ran through everyone before I even saw Luffy type antagonist, and this then leads to Lucci on Water 7, the Oars vs Straw Hats confrontation, Kuma vs Straw Hats, and then Kizaru vs Straw Hats, Caesar, and so on and so forth. Enel was the first villain where it's no longer I only have beef with Luffy and never see anyone else. He genuinely just bodied everybody on Skypiea. If a character like Lucci, who, let's be for real, compared to Enel isn't as narratively important or even as strong, if we're comparing pre-time skip versus pre-time skip, can come back and be boxing with people like Post Wano Zoro, Enel can definitely come back and be frying people like Kaido in the future. It's not crazy at all to say, especially seeing how narratively important he is now, as he has access to info in space that predates the Void Century and genuinely could even predate the time of Nika because people came from space down to the White Sea. Enel pre-time skip was a different breed completely. You can argue all you want about how he fared against Luffy, but compared to literally anyone else in the pre-time skip until you get to characters like Kizaru and Rayleigh, Enel fries all of them with zero difficulty because he not only had a Logia, but a Logia set apart from the rest of them by being called one of the few powers that makes you invincible. Enel needs to be talked about more because the discussions we're having about the future of the story are starting to get stale. If Oda can bring back Moria, Lucci, and Crocodile, then he's holding Enel in his back pocket for the biggest reveal ever. Never forget, Loki being a lightning dragon is literally just Enel upscale. Another pre-time skip villain I think is underrated is Foxy. Foxy genuinely had hands back in Long Ring Longland. People dunk on him a lot for the arc he was in and his design, but he was actually one of the better pre-time skip villains. Sure, he's not Enel strong or Lucci strong, but he was definitely a threatening antagonist and has the most unique premise for an arc we've gotten in the story so far. Long Ring Longland genuinely is a top tier premise for an arc in a story about pirates because it's both low stakes and high stakes at the same time. The pirate games were genuinely interesting and they're not battles the Straw Hats always had to win because winning or losing isn't a life and death circumstance. Foxy was charismatic, funny, and genuinely interesting, and I'm keeping it 100. I pray the way that the Blackbeard vs Luffy fight goes is similar to the Davy Back conflict of Long Ring Longland because that's way more interesting than a Fate of the Universe bloodbath where everyone is just fighting. Pirate games are a much more interesting style of conflict and Foxy was the one who brought it to us. Whether it's Buggy or Blackbeard, I do want to see a Foxy style fight again in the story because that would be way more interesting than clashing named attack piece. Cracker is up here because of how much you guys underrate him for what he was. Cracker's main contention point for me is against Doflamingo. Cracker is ragdolling Doflamingo in a fight. He's literally better in every conceivable way besides having Conqueror's Haki and an Awakening, and he makes up for that by simply having a better ability. Cracker was the intro we got into what the strength of an Emperor's crew actually looked like, and until we got to Katakuri, genuinely he's still the best example of that disparity because everyone after him doesn't feel as unbeatable. Cracker and Katakuri are perfect examples of what new faction antagonists should feel like. They should feel like, oh my god, if these guys are this strong, then how strong is their leader? If the Holy Knights got run like Cracker, no one would clown them. If the Tobiropo or Calamities got run like Cracker, no one would clown them. And it would actually feel like an achievement for the Straw Hats to beat them once they do beat them. Cracker doesn't get enough respect for the way he was written and the fact that he's actually a very valid fighter as well. I know I just clowned on the Calamities a little while ago, but I have to put some respect on Jack's name. I call Jack underrated not in the sense that I think he's respectable, but I think he's just slandered too much for what he is. Jack was actually a very strong character, it's just that he was always pitted against characters who were just as strong too. Slander for Jack, in my opinion, comes from a misunderstanding of how strong the Scabbards actually are. I was having this argument in my Discord about Kinemon's strength in the story up until Wano because they were bringing up how Jack was fighting the Minks and the Scabbards. So essentially take this as both Jack and Kinemon. Jack was doing well against waves of Sulon Minks on the rooftop, which were stronger than Carrot, the same Carrot who in base was pressing post-dress Rosa Zoro. Kaido himself puts respect on Jack's name yet clowns Luffy, who he one-shot in gear 4 post-Whole Cake. Jack is not getting mid-diff by Katakuri, and in all honesty, that's going to be a hard fight for Katakuri because if it took Cat that long to drop Luffy, he's going to be taking even longer to drop an ancient Zoan Fishman hybrid that is quite literally built like a tank and can fight Inu Igarashi and Neko on cycle for 5 days and 5 nights. And now on to Kinemon. Kinemon's slander comes from the idea that Kinemon somehow magically reached the level he was at in Wano and wasn't on that level the entire time we've known him. Kinemon getting cut up and dispersed by Law does not make him weaker than Law, because Kinemon would literally have had no idea what Law's powers are, or that it's even possible for Law to have had powers, because he doesn't know what devil fruits are at this point. All him getting cut up by Law would mean is that Law's haki was close enough to his for his abilities to work, which, newsflash, Law's abilities also worked on Doflamingo, even though Doflamingo would have bodied Law in a fight. Kinemon with no head and no legs pressed Brook and made him run away. This is not Oda showing that Kinemon is in any way relative to Brook, which is an argument I've been hearing people use. Well, if he was stronger than Dofi, why didn't he help? Because he was preoccupied with a birdcage for one, and two, that wasn't the plan that Law and Luffy agreed on, and Kinemon is only there to assist the plan. You wanna know why Oda had Zoro, Kinemon, and Fuji pushing the birdcage instead of letting it damage the battlefield a little and then going on to help Luffy beat Dofi? In Fuji's case, it was because he couldn't fight Dofi, but in Kinemon and Zoro's case, it's because the battle is supposed to be Luffy versus Doflamingo, not Luffy, Zoro, and Kinemon versus Doflamingo. You guys continuously forget that these are not real characters. The reason Oda didn't have Kinemon load up Doflamingo like he should have is because Oda didn't want the story to go that way. If Kinemon is capable of cutting Kaido, being relative to the other scabbards who are able to fight characters massively stronger than Dressrosa Gear 4, who blitz Doflamingo and has him surviving ACOG strikes from Kaido while already damaged, then why do we think that the Doflamingo who is terrified of even hearing Kaido's name is capable of hanging with him? Kinemon is way stronger than people give him credit for, and it's because you guys don't want to acknowledge the power creep that takes place in the story, and the fact that if nothing contradicts the characters being that strong in the past, and they're never stated to have gotten stronger, it just means that they were always that strong. The constant disparity between where Sanji's placed versus Zoro is literally just a micro version of Mihawk versus Shanks. Zoro is the feats man and Sanji is the narrative man. Sanji fans do need to acknowledge he's never going to be stronger than Zoro or even dead even, but that doesn't mean he's going to be getting high or mid-diff by Zoro. They will always be close, but close doesn't mean equal, it means relative. Neither is one-shotting the other, neither is whooping the other. Outside of the Zoro arguments though, Sanji is disrespected when it comes to strength generally because people seem to believe he doesn't have a top-tier kit because he hasn't used any advanced haki yet. Sanji is still one of the strongest fighters in the verse off of raw physicals alone. Him not having advanced haki yet keeping pace with Zoro, who does, even if just slightly behind him, is a testament to his strength and just further proof of where he will be once the story ends. He's also slandered a lot for other miscellaneous things like Yags and Pudding, which if we're gonna treat these characters like their own people, then sure, I guess. I wouldn't call myself a Sanji fan or someone who enjoys seeing him on screen, but you have to be capable of acknowledging when a character is getting unnecessary hate. Another character that gets unnecessary hate is Jinbe. Jinbe slander has seen a surge in recent times with his boxman and UPS driver meme skyrocketing in the community. I don't know what you all expected from Jinbe, but he's basically done everything he's been meant to do, which is to hold down the crew when Zoro and Sanji aren't around. Jinbe is the definition of a well-rounded combatant. He's got feats, narrative portrayal, and in-story respect. Part of the reason that Luffy became a fully fledged emperor after Wano, whether you want to admit it or not, is him having Jinbe on his crew. Jinbe is that guy. I see so often people calling Jinbe a jobber, saying he'd get washed by Sanji and Zoro, when it's constantly shown that the top three behind Luffy is Zoro, Sanji, and Jinbe. There is no more monster trio that includes Luffy because Luffy is genuinely mid to low defing Zoro or Sanji in a fight once he goes Gear 5. You guys need to start putting more respect on Jinbe's name. He has a good argument for beating all the calamities in a 1v1, King included, because Jinbe has Duraneg that can actually bypass King's durability as it goes through the skin, and his speed and versatility in combat are both incredible. Him getting caught up by Gunko is 1 for the plot, and 2 because Gunko is actually strong. People are acting like she wasn't being portrayed relative to Garland before she even became a Holy Knight and got Imu Amps in God Valley. Oda sidelining Jinbe so often is just proof that Jinbe is as powerful as he is, because Oda doesn't know how to write Jinbe in an actual conflict because he just changed up the tide of the battle completely. There's a reason why certain characters are always put to the side unless it's a major high stakes battle. It's because they're too strong to be used in everything, otherwise there's just zero tension. Last of the strats I'm gonna have on the list is Robin. Robin is underrated because people treat her like she doesn't do anything besides read poneglyphs now. She never did anything besides that in the pre-time skip either. I don't know when Robin slander took hold, but there's quite literally no difference between the things Robin did pre-time skip and the things that she's supposed to be doing post-time skip. You're slandering her for being the way she's always been, and this isn't even an Usopp thing where she's meant to progress and be more of a fighter or do things other than read the poneglyphs, because her entire role on the crew is to be an archaeologist. The fact that she knows how to fight and is as powerful as she is alone should be praised because she's genuinely one of the stronger women in the verse. Outside of Big Mom, Gunko, the Empresses of the Kuja Pirates, and Yamato, she might currently be one of the most physically powerful women just off having Demonio Floor alone. Not everyone can be a meathead fighter, not everyone can scrap all the time. Robin doesn't have to be active in every conflict for her to be a good character. Just let some characters chill and take a back seat sometimes. I mentioned him in the Luffy segment, but Kizaru is one of the most underrated characters I've seen recently, and it's quite literally only because he's an admiral. If Kizaru wasn't an admiral, people would genuinely be placing him at the top 10 currently. Kizaru load the Snake Man with ease. No one mentions that. Kizaru goes 1-for-1 with a stronger Gear 5 than Kaido fought while not even using advanced Haki or dark armament coding, but no one mentions that. Kizaru takes a stronger version of the attack that knocked Kaido on his butt that was amped by his own attack too, by the way, but no one mentions that. But him being on the ground while still conscious for literally a minute or so after he gets hit by White Star Gun is all you hear about. Him getting turned into a pizza while literally being checked out of the fight completely is all you hear about. Y'all genuinely just have to be for real sometimes, man. How is it possible that you think that if Kizaru was fighting Luffy for real that he wouldn't have won? How is it possible that you think that Kaido or Big Mom were high or even mid-diffing Kizaru? This just doesn't make sense to me. The Admiral disrespect genuinely is just hilarious at this point because the Admirals will only continue to get stronger while Kaido and Big Mom will only continue to get clipped. Taking it to the old era for a little bit, I got Chinjao up first. Old Chinjao is not Prime Chinjao. No one cares about Old Chinjao's feats because he is quite literally nerfed both physically and mentally. Prime Chinjao, the one at his peak, was boxing Roger and Garp post God Valley, and it took Garp getting ready specifically for Chinjao for him to beat him, and that was a clash that Garp struggled in heavily while Chinjao was basically just chilling. Old Ray being above Old Chinjao doesn't mean that Prime Zhao doesn't whoop Prime Ray. You guys need to understand how crazy it is that Chinjao was actually fighting Roger and Garp consistently at the time that you all consider to be them at their pinnacle. This is Roger before his sickness and Garp at the height of his strength. The fact that Chinjao is one of the few characters stated to have been in conflict actively with both, and people still want to use this Mickey, Gabon, and Ray over Chinjao nonsense, Odin over Chinjao nonsense, Big Mom over Chinjao nonsense is just crazy. A Prime Chinjao would unironically be one of the 4 emperors if you dropped him in the current era, once you add the Kano Kingdom army which he's in charge of and the resources the country has on top of his strength. Chinjao falling off as an old man says nothing about where he was at in his peak, and we need to stop acting like it does. The next old era legend people never want to give credit is Shiki. Shiki is far less underrated than Chinjao, but Shiki is still heavily disrespected not just in strength but in importance. Shiki is a victim of Oda not doing anything with the old gen characters that aren't Garp and Roger adjacent. He's just the Sengoku of the pirates in Roger's era, which is just a statement and narrative man. But Shiki actually has cold feats and portrayal to back up his statements and narrative. Shiki returning to the current story is not as crazy as people would love to make it seem, especially since we know that Shiki isn't dead, and in his canon intro chapter, chapter 0, he's literally stated to be in hiding planning something big. We know he wants to take over the world, and we know he knows what the ancient weapons are. I've always had the theory that Kid is going to end up being found by Shiki offshore Elbaf, and that Gabon looking like Shiki in that one cover page with Crocus is Oda doing some fake out for when Shiki is actually in Elbaf. The Heaven Realm has not been seen a single time so far, and we're about to face Imu. I guarantee you there's something big up there, and that something is going to be Shiki, and a hint at where Uranus actually is. Put some respect on Shiki's name because he's always been nice like that. The last old era legend I'm going to be speaking about is Xebec. Xebec, but everyone loves Xebec. I'm speaking to the people who clown Xebec for getting Domi reverse seed, like that ability wasn't made specifically to explain why God Valley ended the way it did. Xebec getting beeline by Imu to the point he not only had Herald sent to kill Xebec twice, but when that failed, orchestrated God Valley as a means to get to Xebec, and after finding how he still wasn't dead, decides to pull up to God Valley personally when all of the biggest pirates and the Marines, including Garp, just to make sure that Xebec got finished off, speaks to how much of a threat Xebec actually was. I see so many people acting like Xebec got clipped after his era. Like his legend not surviving like Rogers did is a knock on Xebec, as if he wasn't literally CIA, Men in Black, mind wiped from everything possible, and his crew never speaks about him because they think he turned on him in God Valley. Xebec's name needs to be respected for what it actually is because he was the one who got the ball rolling for where we are right now in the story. Roger never sees Imu if not for Xebec. There is no God Valley without Xebec. There is no Marineford without Xebec. There is no World Destroyer Loki. There is no Herald committing himself to serving the world government and then getting enslaved, thus forcing Loki to eat a Nidhogg fruit if not for Xebec. So many things in the story don't happen at all without Xebec in it, and it's not even the way that Roger had it where all his important influences would have happened regardless due to destiny. The only reason that these things happened the way they did is because Xebec was who he was. Xebec was a part of the fate that led to where we are in the story right now in a way that Roger wasn't, because if Imu did not intervene to stop Xebec's fate, there would be no pirate king, only a king of the world. The thing that Saturn was afraid of being unleashed after God Valley was Xebec, which is why Imu had to step in. Put some respect on the goat's name. People love flip-flopping when the hype dies down, but it's either you're with it or you're not with it. Koby's an obvious pick for the fact that no one genuinely takes him seriously right now. We know he's going to be something and that he has a good trajectory, but we can't bring ourselves to believe that he's actually close to where he needs to be right now, and to that I say he's actually very close to his breakthrough moment. His strengthening of his resolve in Egghead and him losing Garp is the exact catalyst we need for what a future Koby will end up being, because now he's on his own. Honesty Impact showcases the type of strength he possesses when his back is completely against the wall. In Honesty Impact genuinely might not even be the strongest attack that Koby is capable of producing, and on sheer damage alone, it's above a Dressrosa Gear 4 King Kong gun. Koby now having both his back against the wall and a new drive to defeat strong pirates will make the next time we see him completely incomparable to what we saw in Hachinosu. It was never a matter of Koby not being strong enough, but Koby not being in a situation where he can showcase his strength effectively. Koby had a 2-year time skip as well, and Honesty Impact is the first glimpse we've gotten as to what he's learned. That attack is not his peak, and based off the fact it's just like Galaxy Impact, which was essentially Garp's opening move, basically his Gum Gum pistol, that would just mean that Koby has an entire bag of attacks that could even be stronger than this one that he can draw onto. Not even to mention him knowing Rokushiki and using it consistently in combat. Him possibly gaining advanced techniques or gaining different ways to use it like CP0 can will also just show us why Koby is going to be nice like that very soon. I have Ulti as underrated because people genuinely don't give her credit for all the things she did in Wano. Ulti is the only Tobi-Roppo that makes you believe that they're supposed to be the contenders for the title of All-Star. Her being capable of holding Luffy off post-Udon training, and him believing he'd need Gear 4 just to finish her off, her rebounding from Thunder Bagua and Mazer Cannon and being the child of someone who was going at it with Kaido back in the day just shows how respectable of a fighter she is. Unironically, she's giving Katakuri a run for his money because she, at bare minimum, is performing similar to the way that base Luffy performed on the rooftop before 10-10. His speed feats, his durability feats, and to some extent his AP feats are similar to what a base ulti should be capable of, and then you add her hybrid form on top of that. People want to make it sound crazy that she's even in a discussion with Cap, but the power cliff was that steep in Wano. If she ever comes back in the story in the future, since she's with Yamato, I can definitely see her hauling ass on the battlefield again. Lucci downplay is something I originally planned on making a video on, going over the anime's adaptation of this fight with Zoro, but I genuinely have so many video ideas that I never get around to making most of them due to time. Lucci did not get low diff by Zoro, he did not get mid diffed either. If that fight went on uninterrupted, it genuinely would have lasted hours with both sides giving it their all. Zoro was using Advanced Conquer Saki on Lucci, and an Awakened Lucci is probably taking out King, definitely taking out Katakuri, and is also probably beating Sanji at the point of Egghead. Lucci downplay is just Zoro glaze because people want to act like he's close to Luffy. Luffy is bodying Zoro the same way he bodied Lucci. They are not close anymore. We need to stop acting like Luffy and Zoro are Roger and Rayleigh, and even if they were, Roger is still bodying Rayleigh in a fight based off how we see him do Oden, who's portrayed relative to Goban, who is stated relative to Rayleigh. Big Robert needs more respect. I don't know what he does in the future of the story because I don't see him fighting on the side of the government anymore. Maybe he ends up joining Cross Guild, and Cross Guild just becomes the pre-Tom Skip villains all banding together against Luffy. Last on the list is the Hall of Fame most underrated character, and that's Big Mom. People genuinely treat Big Mom like a second-class citizen when it comes to debate like this, myself included. Her ability is one of the most busted in the verse, her strength is on par with that of Kaido, and she's been hanging with Roger, Whitebeard, and Shiki for at least a decade. Big Mom's loss against Kid and Law, 1, isn't even a real loss, 2, was mostly because of plot if we're being honest, and 3, isn't a knock on her as a fighter, as neither of them got feats off on her that made them seem stronger as they were just forcing a ring out. Those two could not actually beat Big Mom. Big Mom would have murdered them in a fight if Onigashima wasn't floating above the ocean, and them pushing her outside it was the only option they had. The idea that Kaido whoops Big Mom when they're literally stated numerous times to be relative and capable of killing one another is just obscene Kaido glaze because people either can't respect Big Mom's strength or acknowledge the fact that Kaido was not on Whitebeard and Roger's level. Big Mom is another character who suffers from Oda not knowing how to write out strong people. Big Mom being on Wano alone genuinely should have just been the end of the raid, outside of another emperor coming in to help Luffy. You literally have a second Kaido that can turn the battlefield itself into her ally with crazy AoE and Advanced Conquer Saki. The fact Big Mom didn't even use ACOG vs Kid and Law yet was capable of murdering both shows how badly Oda was interviewing her in that battle. Zoro is not hanging with Big Mom, Yamato was not hanging with Big Mom, and Kid and Law aren't beating her or doing anything close to it even if they had a rematch. We need to start acknowledging Big Mom for what she really is, because if Luffy was fighting her instead of Kaido, he would have struggled just as hard to beat her even with Gear 5. These are all the characters I thought were relevant enough to be added to the video or those I had enough to stay on. Genuinely didn't plan for the video to go on as long as it did because this was supposed to just be a filler video, but I just have so much stuff to yap about with One Piece on any topic. The Admirals video, like I said again, is going to be my 3K sub special because it's probably going to take me a month to edit. In the meantime, I'll try pumping out shorter videos more consistently because although I wanted to do long format, I think shorter and more frequent is better than longer and less frequent because I'm burning myself out trying to edit 20-minute videos while working 60 hours a week. If you stayed, let me know what your most underrated characters are and for what reason. Which characters in the video do you agree with and which ones do you think aren't actually underrated? As always, if you enjoyed what you saw, drop a like, subscribe, and stay tuned in for more high quality One Piece content. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.